Hello everyone, welcome to Free Learning School. Today we will see journal entry examples. So I'll take a company and I'll try to explain 50 transactions of that particular company, and I'll explain what should be the journal entry and why. So let's begin. ABC Company was incorporated on January 1, 2019 with an initial capital of 5,000 shares of common stock having 30 par value. So what does that mean? That means the ABC Company has issued 5,000 shares. The value of each share is $30. So the total value of the shares will be 5,000 times 30, which is 150,000 USD. So on January 1, we have to put a journal entry. So what should be the journal entry? So as the organization is receiving cash by selling its share, so you are receiving cash, that means you are actually increasing the asset of the organization. So if the asset is increased, in that case cash should be debited and common stock should be credited. So that's how the journal entry will be. You will debit cash by 150,000 USD and credit common stock by 150,000 USD. So this is how we actually write a journal entry. So you put the serial number, then date, account name, debit, credit. So in this debit and credit, we actually put values. On the account name, we actually describe which account we should debit or credit. And finally, we put a comment here. So for example, in that case, I wrote to record stock issuance. So on January 1, the company actually issued some stock and they received cash and actually sell common stock. So this is the journal entry for the transaction number 1. So let's see the next transaction. On January 2, 2019, an amount of 40,000 was paid as advance rent for 4 months. So how you should analyze a transaction, whether you will record it or not, and if you record it, where. So here they actually paid 40,000 USD to the house owner as an advance rent. So things that need to be noticed is it was an advance rent for 4 months. So this is not an expense. So you are paying in advance. So you haven't consumed the rent. For example, you haven't utilized your house for a month. So at the beginning of January 2, how should you put it? So as you are paying cash, you are actually decreasing the organization's asset. So cash will be credited. And what should be debited? The debit is prepaid rent. Prepaid rent is not an expense. It's actually an asset. So let's see the journal entry. It says prepaid rent debit by $40,000 and cash credit by $40,000. You have to put the date, that on which date you actually paid the cash or the transaction took place. Then you put the comment. In that case, we said rent paid in advance for next 4 months till April 30, 2019. So after 1 month, you have to adjust it. For example, in that case, per month rent is $10,000. So when the January 31st, you have to adjust this rent. You have to put rent expense in debit and prepaid rent in credit. So that's how you will put adjusting entry. So for adjusting entry, I will make another video. So let's forget about this. For the time being, just concentrate on what is the transaction and what we will record it. So it will be prepaid rent debit and cash credit. So let's see the next transaction. On January 3, 2019, paid 80,000 cash on the purchase of equipment costing 90,000. The remaining amount was recognized as a 1-year note payable with an interest rate of 5%. So what you actually did, you actually bought equipment. The value of the equipment is 90,000 US dollar, but you paid 80,000 cash, and for the rest 10,000 you actually agreed on a 5% interest agreement saying that you will pay within a year, and that is actually a liability for you because you actually promised that on a future date you'll pay that 10,000. So what should be the journal entry? So as you paid cash 80,000, 80,000 should be credited, and you bought equipment of 90,000, so 90,000 will be debited. So as we know that debit side and credit side will always be equal. In our case it is not happening. Where is the rest 10,000? So rest 10,000 you actually have to put on credit as a liability, as a notes payable. So the journal entry will look like this. You will debit office equipment 90,000 and credit cash 80,000 and credit notes payable by 10,000. And you have to put a comment. For example, in that case we wrote purchase of office equipment, notes payable 10,000. We just put it in a comment that we have a outstanding payment to be made. So notes payable is a liability. Whenever there is an increase in liability, that should be credited. So let's see the next transaction. On January 6, 2019, purchased office supplies costing 22,000 on account. So you actually purchased office supplies. The value of the office supplies is 22,000 and you bought on account. That means you bought on credit. That actually indicates you are increasing the liability. So in that particular case, office supplies should be debited by $22,000 and the liability, that means $22,000 will be credited as a accounts payable. So office supplies has been debited by $22,000 and you increase the liability as you bought on credit, so it will be credited by $22,000. So we put a comment that purchase of office supplies is on credit. So let's see the next transaction. On January 9, 2019, you have provided services to your customer and received $45,000 in cash. So whenever you receive a cash, it should be debited because the asset of the organization has been increased. So $45,000 will be debited and service revenue should be credited. So whenever there is a service revenue or revenue is always credited when there is an increase. So received cash against the service provided. The value of the service was $45,000. So let's see the next transaction. On January 13, 2019, paid the accounts payable on the office supplies purchased on January 6. So can you remember that on January 6, you bought some office supplies worth of $22,000. So you actually paid it back. So what happened? You actually paid cash now on January 13th. So on January 13th, we actually paid cash. So cash is credited. And what should be debited? Your accounts payable should be debited because you are offsetting your accounts payable now. So let's see the next transaction. On January 15, 2019, paid wages to its employees for the first 2 weeks of January. Aggregating amount is $25,000. So wage expense. Whenever there is an expense, it should be debited. So wage expense will be debited by $25,000 and what should be credited? You actually paid cash. So cash should be credited. So the journal entry will be wage expense $25,000 debit and cash $25,000 credit. So payment of employee wages for the first 2 weeks of January, that was in our note. So let's see the next transaction. On January 17, 2019, provided 60,000 worth of services to its customers. They paid 45,000 and promised to pay the remaining amount after 1 month. So you actually provided services to one of your customer. The value of the service is 60,000, but you have received $45,000 now and the customer promised that after 1 month he will pay you back. So what should be the journal entry? As you provided services, it's a revenue. Whenever there is a revenue, it should be credited. So service revenue should be credited by $60,000. And you have received cash of $45,000. So $45,000 will be debit. So on your credit side it's 60,000, on your debit side it's 45. What is the remaining balance? Remaining balance is 15,000, which should be a accounts receivable for you. So the journal entry should be cash $45,000, accounts receivable $15,000, and service revenue credited by $60,000. So that is the journal entry. So let's see the next transaction. On January 21, 2019, you have received $10,000 from customers for the service provided on January 17. So on January 17, you actually had some accounts receivable of $15,000. Now you have received cash. So what should happen? As you are receiving cash, the cash will be debited because the asset has been increased. And accounts receivable is reducing now. So it should be credited. Previously it was debited, saying when the customer promised you that he will pay you back. Now he is paying you back. So you will reduce the accounts receivable by crediting it. And as you are receiving cash, you should debit the amount by $10,000. So let's see the next transaction. On January 23rd, 2019, you have received $6,000 as an advance payment from customers. So read it very carefully that you have received cash, but you haven't provided the service. So as you receive cash, just put cash debit by $6,000. Now what should be credited? You haven't provided the service. So unearned revenue. This is a new account. Unearned revenue is actually something which a revenue is not yet earned, but it's in a process because you have received the cash and you have promised that you'll provide the service. So this revenue is not yet earned. So you will put it as a unearned revenue. So the journal entry will be cash debit by $6,000 and unearned revenue credit by $6,000. And you put a comment that cash received for a future service, that on a future date you'll provide that certain service. So let's see the next transaction. On January 25, 2019, purchased office supplies costing $7,500 on account. So it's pretty simple. Office supplies, as you are purchasing, the asset is increasing of the organization. So you will debit the office supplies by $7,500 and it is on account. So accounts payable will be credited by $7,500. So the amount is of, so the journal entry will be office supplies $7,500 debit and accounts payable $7,500 credit. So the next transaction is on January 29, 2019, paid wages to its employees for the third and fourth week of January. The total value is $25,000. So can you remember on January 15th we actually paid for 2 weeks. Now on January 29th we are paying for the last 2 weeks. That means third and fourth week. So it's pretty simple. As you are paying wages, so wage expense would be debit by $25,000 and cash will be credit by $25,000. So let's see the next transaction. On January 31, 2019, paid $7,000 as dividend. So I'll describe dividend on a separate video, but for the time being, you just remember dividend is something which you actually pay to your investor because they invested in your company to earn some money. So dividend is like a portion of your profit you are giving to your investors. So as you are paying dividend, so dividends will be debit by $7,000 and you are actually paying cash. So cash will be credited by $7,000. So let's see the next transaction. On January 31st, 2019, you received an electricity bill of 3,250. So whenever you receive a bill, you have to record it, whether you pay the cash or not. In that particular case, we actually received the bill, but nowhere it states that you paid. So you haven't made the payment yet, but still you have to record it because you received the bill and it becomes a liability for you because you already took the services or consumed the electricity. So what should be the journal entry? It will be electricity expense debit by $3,250 and utilities payable electricity $3,250. So you just received the bill. Whenever you will make the payment, in that case, utilities payable will be debited and cash will be credited. So that's pretty simple. So let's move on to our next transaction. On January 31st, 2019, you received another bill, which is a telephone bill. The bill amount is 2,130. So it will be the similar treatment like our previous one, electricity bill. So telephone bill expenses or telephone expenses by 2,130 and utilities payable telephone by 2,130. So let's move on to our next transaction. On January 31st, 2019, you found out that the total miscellaneous expense paid during the month was 4,260. So what should be the journal entry? As it has already incurred, you have already incurred the expenses, so it will be miscellaneous expense debit by 4,260 and you paid because it says you paid here, so cash will be credited by $4,260. So these are the 15 examples. So I actually took those transactions where there is a monetary value. But if you see any transaction where there is no monetary value, you should not record it because accountants only record when the transaction got some monetary value. So this is the 15 example I have explained. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel and do not forget to press the bell icon. Thank you so much.